Well, good afternoon. Actually, it's still morning. I am going to continue on painting of the reflection on a lake where we've got the deer put in. When I worked on this the other day, I only put the blues in underneath. I probably could have also started putting some of the yellow greens in, but I didn't. So now I need to start building those up. So what I'm going to want to build up, I'm starting from the light, going toward dark, starting with my brightest colors, dulling them as I go. So my next lighter and bright colors are these yellow greens in here, yellow greens back in behind this hill, the colors coming down into here, possibly a little bit on the deer. There's some green back up on that hill there. So those are all things that I'm going to be working on. I'm also going to be paying attention to my value study, which we did, where my darkest darks are, where my midtones are, where my light spaces are, and try and maintain those as I build this up. So let's go ahead and set these up where I can see them. You won't, but I'll put something in the video for you. All right, got my rag, got my water, got my brushes. So I cleaned out one of the little spots in my tray because when I'm going to work with a light yellow green, it's such a pale color that I want to be sure that I have a clean space for it. So this is a Holbein's leaf green. I think I'm gonna be adding a little bit of yellow to it, possibly. Put a little bit of New Gamboge yellow in there to warm it up just a tiny bit, very yellowy green. And then let's make a little bit darker green. Start with that same one. I had a little bit of blue in here, phthalo blue. And let's see, let's add a little sap green to that. The sap green is a little bit warmer green than what that phthalo and the yellow were creating. And then I'm going to want a darker green. Let's see, let me add, I've got some phthalo in my pan here, but I'm going to add some ultramarine blue to it. Hopefully I've got enough here in my pan. I'm going to have to be refilling that. Phthalo with, and actually I just put a little bit more phthalo into here. Phthalo with burnt sienna makes a very pretty foresty green. It's on the cool side, so it's a cool green. And I feel like, just sort of looking up there at that green, I'm going to add a little bit of yellow to that. Just didn't feel like it was quite warm enough. Yes, there, that's a pretty color. And, but it's going to have to go darker for my dark parts. I'm going to be building up some midtones first, so let's not worry about going any darker with that at the moment. Do I want to make one more darker? Sure, let's make one more darker. This had gray in it, and for the real dark, it's okay if that gray goes in there. Gray, as you remember, is all three of the primary colors will make gray. And a little more phthalo in there. Some burnt sienna. You know, that's going to need some Hooker's green put into it. Hooker's green is a blue green, and I still want this, even though it's dark, to really lean into the green side. Oh, that's starting to look more like what we want. Okay, so that's a little darker, and this paper really is absorbing awfully fast. Okay, so that at least gets me started. Hopefully it's enough. clean my brush out really well. And then we're going to start with this yellow or green. And I have to think about how much space I can actually control paint in. Okay, that's going to go dark there, but it's okay if the greens come in across that. I'll go ahead and start at this back area here then. So the darks can go in on top of these, and I just need to sort of think about what kind of color we are going to end up wanting to show in the end. And if I make this a little uneven on this, then it can come into, and let me just do a little medium green on top of some of that. And then it's going to get darker down into this other area down in here. But I also have a beautiful yellow here that I don't want to lose. So let's just start down in here. And I'm going to actually say maybe this is remember this is that, yeah, don't want that too dark. That's actually going to come in with a little bit of burnt sienna on it. So just put some paint on, take some paint off. I'm not worrying about getting the sides of this correct. What I am worrying about is getting the colors, how I want them, because I'm going to come back in and I'm going to do some negative painting. By negative painting, I mean I'm going to come in and I'm going to paint this dark back behind this area to make it stand out. I just have to be careful that I don't get too dark here now. So I'm just throwing on some color. And, oh, we want to have some blue sky holes show here. So I don't want to just put yellow everywhere. I want some blue sky holes to show through. And so that was when I pulled off that paint before. That was part of what we wanted to do. And I want to be sure that I'm not losing all my sky holes here. Okay. Sky holes are something that we tend to forget, but are really important to give us that, what do I want to say, the sense of the trees actually against the sky. And so most trees are not 100% filled in. They, that way. Sorry about that. Sometimes it's hard for me to talk and paint at the same time. But your trees are not solid. They have, little clusters of leaves and then breaks. And so when they've got those clusters, and some of this is going to come out and be a little uneven there. So I need to, when I'm painting here in the water area, I'm thinking about painting vertically and horizontally and very little in otherwise, because that's the way the water sits on the surface. When the waves break, they're going to be parallel to the horizon unless they're very close to you. And then your reflections run downward. And let's see, oh, that still needed a little bit more yellow right here. And that's too dark, so let me just get water on my brush, thin that down, and when I paint that darker reflection, it's going to help. It's going to come in and finger into what I just did here. Okay, that's that far hill. Oh, these guys, well, there's going to be some darks that come in there. Okay. And we don't want that too, this is still damp because it's pretty cool today. And here, this is green. This needs to be a little bit more greenish right in there. And I might be too dark. You know, it's so hard to know until you get the darkness of the background in, whether you're too light or too dark on this, because once I get a value change with the darkness, it's going to make a big difference on how this looks. Okay, so now I can start coming in with some of these other darker spaces. And if they'd slightly, softly blend, that's just great. But I do have to be careful down in here. See whether this is moving. Ah, it's not. Okay, I can paint right up to there then. We want that little uneven space in there. And so I'm not putting too much paint here right now because I don't want it so wet that it's going to be running down into there. But it's going to come up against, and this is where a sponge would be really lovely. Got to wet that sponge first and then get it into the paint. And then I can bring that in and just let it, and I can find the edge of that. Okay, and then we needed a little more medium green here. Let me just get into my sap green and mix a little bit of burnt sienna into it. Yeah, that's feeling better. And then we can get some of this green that's over in this area here. It goes right on up into that. And then when it hits the water, it's going to pretty much run down into that water until it finds those edges. That space between the land and the water, I'm going to come back in and I'm going to paint a darker line along through there. So we're just doing this with the sponge. It's working really nicely to come down in here and get this dark into this. And then it needs a little more brownish tone, even a little more back in here, and then a little more in that water. Yeah, okay. And then let's get a little more sap green into there so it's not quite so brown, and maybe just a touch of hookers. And we're going to get some more of these trees up in here. It's mostly light. And then I may need to come in, I think I'm going to need to come in with my brush now and find some even slightly darker spaces. Let's mix these two greens together. I mixed my two darker greens together, and so now I want to try and get some of these dark spaces that are right in here. And then it's going to come down and over to there. Oh, maybe I did that too far over. Okay. Do I care? Maybe. I don't want this quite this dark here. Just come in with my damp sponge and make that a little bit lighter there. And now I'm going to find this little space. It's going to come up and find that way up into those. And then we're going to have some more dark. And I got to be careful with my brush to not be too even. I'm feeling like I'm too even here. And then some of this stuff is going to just get drugged down into this water reflection area. I like painting the trees and the water at the same time because it allows me to see what's happening up above and then sort of reflect it down into the lower area. This is a little bit darker, right? Let's see, that's okay. there. And there's going to be some trees. There's a tree right here, and that, let's see, we need to have a dark brown for that. Okay, I'm done with the yellow. We can put the brown into there. It's going to come down into there, okay. And then this can get some brown into it. And then it's going to have a reflection right underneath of there. This whole shoreline gets some brown on it. And then that goes up into there. Okay. I'm going to step back just a little bit, make sure I'm doing this right. So reflections are right underneath of where there is something. And so then we can come in with this brown right in here. Just sort of pull some of that up into there. And I'm seeing almost a pinkishness to that. I've got a little bit of quinacridone rose in my pan, so let's just add a little feeling of pink in there. It's going to help pull my eye over in there. Maybe I've got it a little too much. Pull just a little of that out. And maybe that needs to be a little more orangey, a little more brownish. Okay. But I like getting a little bit of that opposite color in there. It adds a lovely touch to this. Okay, so now we've got some trees up above here. And they are basically dark against the background. And let's see. I'm going to put in the trunks because the way these are silhouetted here, we can really see these trunks really strong. That's a little fatter trunk, and then some smaller trees. I've got some lines here that I'm not sure that I liked, but they're here, so let's just use them. One of the things I was a little worried about here was the fact that and let's try this rough brush. Yeah. That does a little better job of that. Lighter green in there. That green was too light up in there. It needed to go a little bit darker, and then of course this is all going darker. All right, so now I'll go back to the bigger brush. Let's go back into this darker green, and now that this is drying nicely, I think I can come in right tight to this. Oops, maybe not. And there's a tree running across through here. There's a dark space there underneath, and tree top running through this area here. And there's a tree up there. Okay. I don't want to lose all of that. Some of this looks like maybe it needs to go a little darker green. Let's sap green it. Yeah, this looks too light, but I don't want to get it too dark either, so I've got to be careful here. Just making it a little bit darker. It's so far away. I'm a little concerned about it being too light, but then we've got to be concerned about it being too dark. Now I can come back in through here and do a whole nother dark layer on top of that, but I'm sort of liking what's happening here. Let's see, I don't like that little, we need to get some very natural looking spaces, and if I have too hard of a line, it's not going to look natural. So I'm just coming in and sort of finding some of those and making sure that we have this working. This is just sort of a meditative thing where you don't want to overdo it, but there's a point when it just feels like it needs a little bit more value difference, edges to make maybe some pieces stand out. Like if I come in like this, that makes this look like a little bush in here. This could go a little bit darker right there, and if it does, then that tree then stands out from this other grouping here. And same with these in the back there. So then that can find sort of the top of that tree. Okay, don't do too much of that, Margaret, because if you do, you're going to lose some of what's interesting there, and I might have already lost some of it. So I'm just going to come in with my dry brush, my dry rag, and tap on that just a little bit. I'm going to come back in and do some more darks in here. Okay, so the rest of this reflection is what we need to work on. And so I need to make a little more of my blue. And I have to remember when I do this that I've got that wind line that comes in through here, and I don't want to lose that wind line. My reflection in there is pretty dark, but there's some greens in there too. So let's maybe drop the greens in first. So I'm only going to wet a little, I'm going to wet with this green. That was that line here, so that was my wind line. And then these reflections come down in here. It's got to be pretty much underneath of there, so Margaret has to go over this way just a little bit further. That tree here. And then they come together here at the bottom. This whole bottom area comes together. About the same height, yeah. Some of my lines here, I probably got them drawn too far down. And let's just drop a little yellow into that. For those light trees, we get a little bit of yellow into here. And this was my last one. Now, there's an interesting thing that's happening in this reflection when we get to this side over here, and even with this tree and that tree, is that the water is relatively shallow, and with that reflection on top of the water so that you don't see the sky reflection. You actually see through and to the, okay, yeah. And this is, sorry, I have to pay attention to what I'm doing here for a sec. I did. Let's see. Remember our friendly tissue. I needed that little bit of reflection there. It can get broken, and this is going to go darker. It's going to have a reflection right underneath it here as well for a little bit. And I want to soften the edge of this with an almost dry brush. Okay, that's better. It's going to come out under that. And let me just rinse my brush, dry my brush a little bit more because I want to get a little more of that off the bottom of that. And okay. And oh, this can get some blue in it too. That wind line comes all the way to here, doesn't it? And then we're going to have dry brush in here, and I can dry brush across that just a little bit. Try and keep that as close to parallel to the water surface as possible here. Get those all the way off the edge. Okay. And then that's light up there, but should this actually come up? Yeah, it should. It should come up just a hair further. But I like that it's sort of soft and a little broken there. So that actually made it better. That softened that edge some. And maybe it comes out into there just a little more. You get these little wind puffs that come across, and they don't make absolutely straight lines. You can get a feeling of what the wind's doing by seeing, you know, how those edges are. And I don't know, I maybe have to wait. I probably should wait. I'm going to come in with my rag here right away because I don't want that water running. Okay, there, that's softened. And put just a wee touch of cobalt blue in here. I think we've got that. Now let's get back into here just a little bit. So this darker is going to feed up into here and make these little broken lines into that lighter space. And then some of these guys come out. There's a few of them that run across through there. Getting about to the point where I probably should stop, unless that's dry enough. I can put that mountain in. So that mountain is going to be a blue-gray, and it's going to be lighter here than it is over there. So let's just I like using ultramarine blue for something like this, but it needs, does it need a hint of green in there? Perhaps on this side, or does it need a hint of purple? I'm going to say a hint of purple. Let's put just a hint of purple in there. Okay. Hopefully we like that color. Let's try it on our little trial sheet here and see. Should that be more grade? So more grade needs that I have to put a little more. Oh, we'll just go for our usual. Little touch of burnt sienna in it. Yeah, I think I like that a little bit better. Okay. Now, and when I come in close to here, I need to think about what is behind this. And there's actually another little island coming out there. And so I need to paint around it. Should I have painted that island first? Oh, I don't think it really matters. But when I get to the horizon, I must paint a straight horizon. As straight as my little old shaky hands can do. Get my head out of there. I want to lean over and get close to it. Old lady eyes. So today is a cool day, so we're not having a lot of trouble with, and I can go a little underneath of there, that, you know, let me just do it this way, and then I'll come back in and I'll lift that tree back out and find the edge of this stuff. And you know, I'm going to do the same thing with this island, just because I want to, yeah. Part of that island's going to go darker, so I'm going to just lift the edge of that island. And now I've got to keep moving here, because otherwise, yeah, it's already starting to happen. How wet or dry I am, I'm going to have to paint all the way across this entire area, because it's what's coming in on this one side feels a little bit wetter. And now this is going to be thinner over here, so let me go ahead and I'm going to just paint right over this island. Once again, I'll do a lift with my tissue. I want to just sort of pull that over, and this is the darkest side. Touch of purple in there. But I want to get that spread in there pretty even. It's wet enough that it's spreading really pretty nicely. And there's a darkness right at the very bottom. Okay. And then this island here, I'm going to just do a little lifting to tell myself about this island. It's actually going to, most of it's going to go darker, but it's all going to go a little bit darker, but it's going to be a little bit brighter color. And so let me just get that all the way in there so we don't have some funny spots in it, and then come back in with this rag or tissue. It's a tissue I'm using, not a rag. I could be using a soft rag as well. And then this little island here, I have a spot here that I don't like, namely that one. Okay, it was wet enough that I could do that. If it had dried any more, I would have not been able to do that. And just get some uneven things on the top of that island. Then once those are totally dry, oh, and I was going to come back in on this tree up here and do a little lift here as well. Okay. walk away from it, Margaret. It needs to dry. I need to step away from it. My next layer on this, I'm going to be going in darker in on the trees. I'm going to find those little dark tree trunks. I'm going to be going darker in on this little land to water intersection. I'll be working on the deer and down in here and putting those two islands in. I'm gonna have to be going darker here as well, but I don't really want to touch that right now. Although there's some just some edges that are going to be sort of hard there. Let me just put some lines across through here. You know, I'm always seeing one more thing that could use some work, but I have to be careful to go further than what I have energy for, because if I go too much too soon, I start not paying attention to what needs to be done, and I'm not seeing where my light and dark patterns are, where my color shifts are. I just start throwing things onto the page, and I don't want to do that. I want to really pay attention to how this works and what the colors are doing and how that's happening. So I think we need to stop. We do need to stop. I will stop. And yeah, and then the next lesson we'll move on to this.